Is tea bitter? Why is the tea made by some people so bitter? It is true that tea is bitter, but as long as we master the skills of brewing, we can avoid the bitterness. To make a good cup of tea, we usually need to focus on 3 elements: the ratio of tea to water, the temperature of water, and the steeping time. The ratio of tea to water. In order to make a good cup of tea, it is necessary to master the amount of tea each time. How much tea we need depends on the type of the tea, the size of the tea sets, and the habits of the drinkers. Different grades and types of tea need different amount of tea. Generally speaking, more water and less tea, the taste is thin and weak. More tea and less water, the tea soup is bitter and astringent. Therefore, for the tender tea leaves, the amount of tea should be more. For the coarse tea leaves, less tea should be used. That is the so-called, the more slender the tea strips are, the more amount of tea we need. Let's take green tea as an example. The rate between the amount of leaves and of water is about 1 to 50, which means that 1 grain of green tea should be brewed with 50 to 60 milliliters of boiling water. You see, this glass is 200 milliliters, so we usually put 3 grains of tea into it and pour 70% full of water. You may ask, do we have to follow this standard when drinking green tea? Not really. For the regular tea drinkers, they like to drink stronger tea. For beginners, they would prefer weaker tea. And for men, they would like to drink stronger tea than women. Therefore, the amount of tea used is only the general standard. The tea drinker may increase or decrease the amount of tea according to his or her personal preferences for intensity of tea soup. The water temperature. Water temperature is also one of the key factors to make a good cup of tea. The temperature of tea brewing refers to the temperature required to make tea after boiling the water. The temperature of the brewing water is an important factor that affects the proportion of water-soluble substances in tea in the volatilization of aroma components. The temperature of tea brewing is related to the type of tea, the tenderness and tightness of each tea. In general, the more tender, loose, and broken the tea raw materials are, the faster tea juice will be soaked out. While the tea raw materials are coarse, tight, and regular, the tea juice is infused out slower. So the water temperature of brewing should be relatively high. That's right, the raw material of green tea is very tender, so we should not use too hot water to brew it. For ordinary green tea, the water temperature should be at 80 to 90 centigrade degrees. If it is high-grade green tea, it can only be brewed with temperature at 75 to 80 centigrade degrees. Only in this way, the liquor color is clear but not muddy. The tea aroma is pure and normal but not down. The taste is brisk but not stewed. the infused tea leaves are bright rather than dark, which makes people drink it delicious and look it touching. If the temperature is too high, the tea leaves will be cooked and unable to keep upright, which makes the tea lose its ornamental value and nutrients. Also, caffeine and tea polyphenols are quickly brewed out, which makes the tea taste bitter and lose its original aroma. The steeping time. So, the last element of making a good cup of tea is the steeping time. Tea brewing time should be moderate. If the time is too short, the tea soup is light and tasteless, and the aroma is not strong. If the time is too long, the liquor color will be too heavy and dark. Besides, the longer the tea brewing time, the more water-soluble extracts in the tea. Therefore, with the extension of the tea brewing time, the taste of tea liquor gradually becomes heavy. If we choose glass to brew tea, it is enough to steep about 2 minutes. Because the raw materials of green tea are tender and not resistant to brewing. We usually brew 2 to 3 times and change the tea when the taste becomes weak. Now, you know how to make a good cup of green tea, right? In fact, the 3 elements of making tea are not only applicable to green tea, but also to other types of tea. It's just that different teas should be brewed with different ratio of tea to water temperature, and steeping time. One thing that needs special attention is that many people do not know the ratio of tea to water for various types of tea. Too much tea will affect the health effect, while too little tea will have negative influence on tea drinking. Too high water temperature will destroy the composition of tea, and too low water temperature will not take the nutrients of tea. The following table may help you better understand how to make a pot of tea correctly. After class, please try to brew a pot of good tea based on the 3 elements of making tea.